and they were giving everybody these pins to put on your lapel, CIA things. I kid you not. To start with, I picked it up off the table, and I looked at the back, and it was made in China.
Oh, okay.
So a friend of mine was sitting there, and I took the pin like this, and I started tapping it with my finger.
Yeah.
I'm going, testing, 1, 2, 1, 2, testing. I said, hey, my pin's broken. I want another one. So he went and got me another one.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. That's actually
It's
really
not picking up anything, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty funny. Good joke for CIA guys. So.
Yeah, number 4.
So tell me about your case today.
It wasn't really a crazy case. It was just that the person was filing bankruptcy. So it was more of just a signing where we were reviewing all the documents that they signed. But it's a process because when you file bankruptcy, it's like 30 pages of paperwork.
Sorry, how you spell your name?
Badeen. Common spelling. I'm sure everybody knows it.
You said Badeen?
Correct.
Right.
2 E's.
Okay. All right. What's your just last initial?
No, that is his last
Oh.
name. His first name is Jim.
Huh?
His first
Jim.
name is Jim.
Oh,
Jim
Last
Badeen.
name is B-A-D-E-N.
That's right. Bad, mean Badeen.
Yeah,
They used to also
that
call me
part.
Edie I mean Badeen.
Yeah, that's so funny.
what is that? Veterans in
Veterans in Business.
Business. All right.
Number 4.
Bad, mean Badeen. Yeah, I was a mean person.
Were you really?
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe you.
Oh, I was terrible. I was a nasty man.
I've seen you in action. I'm not sure.
I'll have you know, I was not only I was a military policeman in Army CID.
Okay.
I was a CID agent.
I don't believe you.
You ever seen that movie, God, what's his name? Reacher, Jack Reacher?
Yeah.
He was a CID agent.
Oh.
He was a major. That was a
good movie.
He was a major guy. But he wasn't anything like me. I sat behind the desk, ate lots of food. You know, I sit other guys out to do that crap, you know.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Hold on, let me make sure.
Are you ready, Mr.
So we're all tested, right?
Yeah.
You sure I don't need to tell another joke, right? Since I have a religious program, I can tell a religious joke. How's that?
That works too. Whatever makes you
Well,
most
here's a good
comfortable.
one. Off the top of my head, this
Okay.
and a car joke too, because I'm in the car business. Okay, there's this.
You gotta tell the jokes on air.
That's what I'm saying. I feel like we should
You
wait.
gotta tell the jokes on air.
So I feel like we should start
We're supposed to have
with a
some
joke.
saliency to this program. We're talking about the
Yeah,
talking
exactly.
to an attorney, a highly accomplished attorney, good looking, I might add. I really
Thank
enjoy
you.
being here with Keena, good looking, accomplished woman who's
Thank
good looking.
you.
Of course, I'm old, but
No.
all men are still 25 at heart, right?
You know what I'm saying?
That counts. That's
Yeah,
important.
ready? We about to go live.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
2,
You start.
Yeah, okay.
4.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Tuesday with Coffee with Keena. And as you know, in the past, for the month of February, we've been talking with veterans, and we're discussing different resources for veterans, including entrepreneurship and business. I did want to start this show off first by thanking all the listeners. I have family in Los Angeles and Jamaica and London, and everyone has been tuning in, and I'm very appreciative for every time, including right now, because my cousins are tuned in on Facebook. And so I'm just grateful for that and this opportunity that A New You Global will even allow me to have a show and to bring in guest speakers, people that I know, people that I am meeting, and people that have such great experiences that I thought my audience would want to listen to. So today, one of the listeners is Mr. Badeen. I have met Mr. Badeen a few months back, and I have been engrossed in his story. I think he's an amazing guy. And I thought, why not have him on my show? Because he also has a radio show, but we're not going to talk about that. I'm just kidding. You can absolutely talk about it. But I want to introduce you to Mr. Badeen.
Well, thank you, Keena. It's such an honor to be on your program. But
Thank
please
you.
call me Jim.
All right.
The only ones that call me Mr. Badeen are people that are far younger than me, which is most people, actually, at my age. But I just wanted to thank you for letting me on your program. It's so good to be here with such a lovely, young, and accomplished woman such as yourself.
Thank you.
I just wish I were about 30 years younger. So anyway, I guess we're here to talk about veterans courts or other things if you like.
Correct.
So why don't you go ahead and start off? It's your show.
Well, I feel like you should tell me a joke, though.
Oh, my goodness. Well, let's see. I remember I was starting off on one before
exactly.
We went on air. And, of course, you mentioned I have my own radio program. And it's a Christian radio program. So
yes.
I have to tell a
Christian
religious joke, right? So
yes.
We'll get everybody really going here. Okay, let me think. Oh, here's a good one. Okay, the Pope was coming to speak at the United Nations, and lo and behold, he comes in about an hour early.
Okay.
So the chauffeur goes to pick him up in a big limo. And the guy gets out and he says, Your Holiness, you're here early, so I got orders to take you anywhere you want to go, provided you get back to the United Nations in an hour. He says, oh, my son, I've always wanted to drive a big flashy car like this. I've never had that opportunity because I'm a pope, And the guy says, okay. So the guy, driver, he gets in the back, and the pope gets behind the wheel of the car, and he drives, 50 feet and runs into something. So sure enough, here come the police, and the policeman gets out, and he has the guy roll down the window, and he looks, he sees this, the pope. He freaks out, so he goes over to his car, and he gets on the radio and says, Sarge, I got a problem. I got this VIP who was involved in a traffic accident, his fault, but he's a really big VIP, and I don't know if I should give him a ticket. And, the sergeant goes, no, you give him a ticket. I don't care if it's the mayor. You give him a ticket if he's at fault. He says, no, he's higher up than the mayor. He says, well, if it's the governor, I don't care, give him the ticket. And he says, no, he's higher up than the governor. He says, well, you got there, the president or something? He says, well, I don't know, but the Pope is his chauffeur.
That's a good one. I do like
good
that.
Good religious joke, there you go.
Yeah, I like that. See, I appreciate you already.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, now we need to get on to more serious things, right? So.
Yes. Well, I mean, serious, but not so much. One of the things I like to do is have the guests share a little bit about who they are, not as an introduction to the guests before discussing what information you have to provide. So, tell me a little bit about you. Where did you grow up? How did you grow up?
Oh my goodness, let's see. I was born in the state of Missouri. I lived in Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. I like to think that Beaumont, Texas is my hometown because I probably lived there longer than any other place. And then when my parents, we moved up here to Detroit, went to high school at Redford High School in Detroit, which is now a Myers. So,
wow.
And then I went to Eastern Michigan University, and from there I went on to the Army.
Okay.
And went all over the place from there. So I've been kind of a tumbleweed all my life. So.
Wow. And how long were you in the Army for?
Well, I actually did about 12 years active duty, and then I voluntarily transferred to the active reserve, and for some reason that didn't seem to make a difference. They called me back about 5 times over the next 10 years, and I do like 6 months here, 4 months there, whatever.
Yeah.
And they actually had me at one point reporting to some kind of a weird unit. I had to go every Monday night from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. every week. It was the, 417th Individual Mobilization, Augmentation, Research, and Development Detachment.
Oh.
That's what it was. I kid you not.
Wow. Holy smokes.
So we did research and detached. I don't know.
Wow. Now, okay, since they had picked you up a few times while you were in the reserve, were you part of the draft? Were you ever drafted?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, my draft number, the day that the draft ended, my draft number was 17.
Oh, wow.
I missed the draft by exactly 1 day.
Holy smokes.
But, when I graduated from high school, I was approached by the Army ROTC.
Okay.
And they offered me a scholarship. And so I went to college at Eastern Michigan University on a Army ROTC scholarship.
So does that mean you went to college for free?
Well, I paid for it later on because no, you don't take stuff from the government for free.
Okay.
But yeah, I signed up, and then from then on it was like, we own you. So that was about it. But yeah, I went to college on a scholarship at Eastern Michigan, and when I graduated, I was able to get on active duty because it's not a guarantee. It's called Reserve Officers Training Corps.
Got it.
See? And so I was selected for a regular Army commission, which I understand was rare at the time. But anyway, I actually turned that down because I wanted to go active duty as a reservist, and I wanted to go in the military police corps. And originally I was slotted to go in the infantry.
Oh, wow.
So they acquiesced, and they gave me a what they call a reserve commission as a voluntary indefinite status, and sent me to an infantry division.
You have long titles.
So,
wow.
I spent about 2.5 years, I guess, with the 4th Infantry Division as a military policeman in 4th Military Police Company. And then went from there. I got picked up, went to general staff, became a general staff officer for a while, and went from there to Army CID.
What is that?
And that's Criminal Investigations Division, or CIDC.
Like forensics?
Oh, there's some of that, yeah. That we have, well, I should say, when I was in, we had our own laboratory. It was at Fort Hollabard, as I recall.
Wow.
We had a CID laboratory. Even back then, I dare say even today, and probably back then, CID is probably one of the best trained law enforcement investigative elements in the world.
Now, are you biased because of your previous training, though?
No, I really think that. I remember when I walked in the door, I didn't know that much about CID, and my operations officer, who was a CW3, that's a Chief Warrant Officer, 3rd class, he had a master's degree in criminal justice, from Michigan State University, but he also is a graduate of the FBI Academy. He graduated from the German, I think it's a GSG-9 Academy. He went to Scotland Yard. And he actually had gone to Glencoe, Alabama, I think was where it was, or one of those places, and he was a certified Secret Service agent. He went to Secret Service school. Wow. And he was assigned as the bodyguard for many years to the SAC-EUR, what they call the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe. So
I just gotta let you know, this just sounds like a crazy cool movie. Like a spy movie or something like, holy smokes. The problem
is with CID is that it's very secretive in what we do and what we did. I should say do
Got
what
it.
we did, because it's just not something, for example, the last time I think anybody even heard of CID officially, other than the movie Jack Reacher or one of those other things,
you see, it sounds like
is
a movie.
When they had the Dr. Hassan down in Fort, where was that in Texas? What's that big fort down there? You'd think I know off the top of my head. I've been there so many times. Where he shot up the military processing station, and I guess he killed 11 or 12 people.
Yeah.
And CID did the case on that. But after a while, the press kind of drifted away from that because the CID doesn't talk about that stuff. We used to say when I was in that if we had an operation going on, you would know when it's a success because you wouldn't read about it the next day in the paper.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So let me ask you this. Even though you went through ROTC, was Army the life you wanted?
Yeah, I did.
Something you're striving for?
I don't know if it's necessarily the Army, but I've always gravitated, I think, to the military life for some reason all of my even as a kid, I was always thinking about the day I'd go to the Army Academy or something, And my Boy Scout master, I was in Boy Scouts, he was a retired Army colonel.
Wow.
And the next door neighbor was a retired Army colonel.
Wow.
Most of my friends, at least from Texas, went on into the Army. Some of them have just retired. 2 of them retired as brigadier generals, and 2 of them retired as brigadier generals, and one's retiring, or is about to retire, did retire last month, which is a full bird colonel.
Wow. So this is just your normal. This is just how you grew up, is what you've been around, is what you've been exposed to, and so real life looked like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up in a disciplined household, I think.
Okay. Were any of your parents in any military branches?
Oh yes.
Okay.
My father served in the Navy in World War II.
Oh wow.
All of my uncles served in the Army in either World War II or Korea.
Wow.
You know, matter of fact, I had one uncle that actually received 2 silver stars, and he won both of them in the same day.
Holy smokes!
One in the morning and one in the evening. He was in the Normandy invasion.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And
I have an addiction to World War II.
And
so
history buff. Oh,
correct.
Yeah.
But specifically World War II. I just like that part.
Oh,
but
wow.
have you ever, or were you ever deployed during your service?
Yeah. I was, other than, you know, temporary duty, yeah, I did a lot of time in Central and South America as a military police officer down there.
Oh, okay. So we're going to take a break here because I am interested to hear about how it was in Central America.
It was hot and a lot of jungle.
Don't worry, we'll elaborate, but we're going to take a break right here. Thanks. Okay, so what do you think so far?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
A little comfortable, uncomfortable?
No, I'm okay, you know.
Don't change anything?
No. Even if they come after me and say I'm not supposed to talk about that, I don't really care because, you know, I'm terminal now, so they can.
No, don't say it like that.
Hey, what am I gonna do?
I mean, you didn't really say anything except it existed, and
Yeah.
I mean, the world knew
A lot
it
of people don't
existed because of that incident that happened in Texas. But
And I think a lot of people listening to the CID only handles cases that could result in capital punishment or life in prison.
Other than that, you wouldn't really hear about them.
I mean, if in drug cases, it comes under the War Powers Act. Major drug dealers, major stuff. You know, we're talking mobsters and stuff like that. And also any type of heavy weapons of mass destruction. It comes up missing or stolen. Somebody loses a nuke, they call us.
Holy smokes! Because of course nukes go missing.
No, not. I never had a nuke or a chemical weapon come up missing. I did have a few accidents that I had to go in and investigate.
Oh wow.
You know.
Okay.
And we had a lot of homicides because if somebody dies in the Army, regardless of an accident or not, we have to go in there.
Got it.
You know, I think you know, guys getting run over by tanks and stuff. It doesn't happen that often, but when it does,
But when it does, yeah.
You know, I think that the strangest thing is when you think about it, is they go battlefield detective. You know, you're a battlefield detective. So I used to say to myself, so if I go out on the battlefield and there's like 1,000 dead guys there,
Yeah.
my job is to investigate the one that wasn't killed legally.
Oh
And
wow.
that's basically it, you know.
That's interesting.
Or what if you had a crime scene, and I won't talk about this on the air, but what if you had a crime scene that shifted, where the crime scene is now behind enemy lines? And we actually had that happen once. And I'll be doggone, the Army, it was a gang rape of a kidnapped nurse. One of the nurses got kidnapped by a couple of GIs. They got her drunk and gang raped her. And I remember she was about, the crime scene's 3 miles behind enemy lines now.
Right.
So the Army assigned us a squad of U.S. Army Rangers and a helicopter. I flew 2 agents in there in the middle of the night with Rangers. Went in there, got the evidence, repelled out, took it back.
And went away. Oh.
But that was the deal. The Army's very, in those days anyway, the law was like sacrosanct. You know.
Because how long have you been out of the Army now?
Last day on active duty was 1996.
Oh wow.
And I was called up to go to fix a problem with the hospital in, they had a security issue down at Fort McClellan. it was Fort Rucker.
Okay.
So I went down there to help them with their straightening out their hospital security issues.
Okay.
So, but in the civilian life, it was just as interesting.
Oh
I worked
yeah,
in a mental
believe it.
institution.
Really?
Yeah. I was a unit director
Wait,
in a
don't
mental
tell me
institution.
all of it, because then you're gonna have to repeat yourself.
Yeah. Well, I'll just give you some stuff.
Yeah.
That's how I got in. How the court, you know, when they came up with the idea of a veterans court, Judge Khalil did. She established the search committee of the community leaders, and the search committee came upon me, and they called me in.
Really?
Yeah, they said.
I thought maybe you knew someone through the.
No, I didn't even know. I'd never met Judge Khalil. I knew of her. My brother knew of her.
Yeah.
And she called me up out of the blue and said, "I'm Judge Khalil, 17th District Court presiding judge, and I would like to talk to you about helping us out with something. Would you like to come to lunch with me?" At it was that I can't think of the name of the golf course. This one over there, a real fancy one in Dearborn Heights. So I met her out there, and I walk in the door. There's like 15 guys there. Turns out they're the search committee. I mean, some of these guys are high up. I remember Mr. Kelly was there. He was the former mayor.
Wow.
And there was a county commissioner there. Diane Webb was there from the county.
From Wayne County, yeah.
Chief of police was there. I didn't know what it was, and I remember I was sitting. They put me in the middle, kind of like.
Oh, holy smokes!
And I'm sitting there, and well, this is pretty interesting. And that's when she said, "We want to ask you if you want to help us out with this veterans court thing." And I said, "Well, what the hell is a veterans court?" I heard of it.
Right. Because at that point, it was only one maybe in Michigan,
Yeah,
or
it was
one or two
one.
maybe.
That was that was Judge Jordan's court. So yeah, they said, well, we want you because A, you're from the community, or you work in the community, which you do, and you're a military police officer. You have law enforcement experience and civilian, which I did. I worked as a deputy sheriff for a while, and they said then you worked in Texas Department of Mental Health. I was a unit director, had 105 patients, if you want to call them that. And I was a parole officer and a corrections officer.
I mean,
So
wow,
they say
how many
you got-
jobs?
Yeah. Well, I just can't hold a job. That's the problem. So I sell used cars now, so you know. But
I bet you're really good at it, though.
no, not really. I'm good at starting trouble, though. I'll tell you that. But anyway, yeah, that's how they said, okay, you got all this experience and training. We want to use you to be in the veterans court system, right? And I remember sitting there. I said, wait a minute, you're telling me you guys want to do what with veterans? And they told me. I said, do you realize the headache?
Yeah.
I told them, do you realize what you're asking us to do? And the judge says, well, I don't follow what the problem is.
Yeah.
I said, well, you know, at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, they have Special Operations Command, 82nd Airborne Division. They got a Ranger Battalion. They have about 80,000 to 100,000 people on that installation at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It's a city of 100,000. I said, they have 12,000 military police there. Over 1 in 10 people on that installation is a cop. There's a reason for that, which is true. That's where all the killers are.
Holy smokes.
They have one whole company of air assault MPs, highly trained counter. They got rangers and stuff, because you go in to break up a bar fight between some rangers and special forces, somebody's going to get killed, you know, if you're not careful. Because we're not dealing with, I'd say, these people coming out of the military, a lot of these guys at Fort Bragg, they are highly trained, highly skilled, highly professional, experienced killing machines.
Wow.
I mean, think of a whole post of Rambos.
Yeah.
So.
Wow, you're like a walking history book.
Yeah. So. Well, I said
so
this is I don't know. I think if anything, what you should be doing is going to the Army or the Department of Defense and saying, what are you doing about these guys? We gave them to you. They were altar boys and paper boys and football players in high school, and now you're sending them back to us. They got they're psychotic. They're having flashbacks, and also they just happen to be killing machines.
Correct, because at this point they now all have the skill sets to protect themselves.
Of course, the judge said, well, we have to do this because these people are from our community.
Correct.
And we can't rely on the government to do it. We have to take care of our own now because the government's basically cut us loose. And it's true. And in the first couple of years, that's the way it was. I mean, we saw guys come in. It was a lot worse in the beginning.
Hey, we got a couple of cases here, right?
But yeah, there was some guys came through there that if they hadn't come through Veterans Court, I guarantee they'd have killed someone.
I got these ladies here about to order.
Instead, they're out walking the streets now, but they got jobs and wives and kids.
Well, and I think
mortgages.
that's what makes it more complicated. It's because now they're adults.
30 seconds.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put the headphones back on.
Oh, yes.
You're having so much fun.
joking.
You forgot. You forgot.
Can I do a commercial for my radio program?
Sure.
Slices it, dices it.
Huh?
You about to blend in now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we're back. I can't hear myself though. Okay. So we're back. Go for it, Mr. Badeen.
I'm sorry?
Go for it. I know you said you wanted to share something with the audience.
What were we going to share with the audience? I can't remember.
I thought you were going to
I've been hit in the head so many times I can't remember.
Oh, goodness gracious. All right. Well, anyway, welcome back. We're back tuning. And before we went on break, we were talking a little bit about your deployment in Central America, right?
Yes.
And you said it was hot and jungle-like.
Correct.
Would you care to elaborate a little
Well,
bit?
they had these mosquitoes. They were about yay big, and I know you can't see it on the radio, but these things were really big, and they were so nasty. They'd come in at night and steal your malaria pills.
What?
I'm just joking. But yeah, we had to take malaria was a big problem. We had to take malaria pills, and quite honestly, it was. Of course, we were down there for, operations of military sort, I seem to recall the greatest danger was from the bugs and the animals.
Holy smokes.
I mean, they had snakes that would bite you and eat you.
Holy smokes, what?
It's like, oh, let's cross the stream here, and there's like a crocodile that comes up. I mean,
Whoa.
I'm glad I don't live here.
Wow.
So now you know why I live in Michigan, which is
less of everything.
the far away as I could get from that stuff. But,
awesome.
Yeah,
so
it was
where
pretty
else
bad.
Have you traveled with the Army?
Well, I've traveled all over the country. I've been in the Middle East, Lebanon specifically, Turkey, most of the Central American countries and northern countries, Colombia and that kind of thing, South America. That's about it. That was enough.
That's nice. Okay, yeah, no, that's a lot. Okay. And so I am going to piggyback off of a little bit of the things we were talking about during the break.
Okay.
So when did you get out of the Army?
I think my last day was in 1996. It might have been 97, but yeah.
Okay. And once you got out, what was your transition like? Or if you're even still in transition, because I learned through the show that some people are still in the process of transition.
I think I'm still in transition.
Okay.
That many years in the military, and when you consider before that I was in Army ROTC. Yeah. And before that I was in Junior Army ROTC at Redford High School. So military is kind of ingrained in me, And of course I was also in Boy Scouts and that kind of thing. Since I've been out though, when I got out in 1996, I was kind of drifting a bit. I didn't really want to get out, but I was in a position in the Army where I was working in recruiting command. Okay. And I really didn't like it. Okay. And I wanted to transfer back to the real Army. And they said, no, we're going to extend you for another 3 or 4 years in recruiting command. And I said, well, that means for the rest of my life in the Army, I'm going to be a salesman for the Army, basically.
Right.
And I didn't want to do that. And they said, well, that's too bad. Our needs outweigh your wants. And so I said, well, I got one other way, and that's just to go ahead. Since I'm voluntary indefinite status, I'll just go ahead and unvolunteer, such is what I did. Okay. So when I got out, I went back to Texas and joined a reserve unit there. But I got a job in working as a private detective for a fairly famous private detective agency at that time. They'd actually written some books about it. It was the Clyde Wilson Detective Agency, and I felt very flattered that he would ask me to come and work for him. And I worked there for about 2 years and made enough money to where I said, okay, enough of this crazy law enforcement investigative stuff. And I had a midlife crisis or something, and I went and bought a gas station in Beaumont,
gas
Texas.
station?
Yeah. So I became a entrepreneur of my own gas station, and had that for about 4 years. Sold that, and went to work for the state of Texas. I went to work as worked at the it was a contractor for the Texas Department of Mental Health. Okay. And in that I became the safety and security director, and then I became a unit director. So I was in charge of their vocational division, so I had the VOTEC. So I dealt directly with the inpatients, if you will, and the outpatients too. Okay.
So if I want to go back a little bit.
Okay.
What made you decide to be an entrepreneur, and what made you decide you were going to be done with it and get a job?
Actually, it was my kids. I looked at I got 2 children to think about here, and I need to make enough money to get them to college, and I'm getting too old to be playing cops and robbers.
Stealing the paper, yes.
I don't know if going to work in a mental institution was all that much different in a lot of ways, but I remember walking into the hall one time, and I had all the unit was there, and there was 106 people. Wow. And there was me, and I remember the doors shutting behind me, and they locked the doors, and I'm locked in here with all of my VOTEC people, and I'm sitting there thinking in my mind, all these people have spent, some of them, years in residential mental health treatments, and here, I mean, it's like, what if one of them did something to me? They could say, well, I got my card here.
They locked you inside. Holy smokes.
So, but I really, out of all the jobs I've had, I got to admit that was probably the most rewarding, I'll tell you.
Really?
There were things that just made me want to come to work. It was tough, but I remember one time, example, I was walking around in Savotec, and one of my, I won't say patients, we call them clients, was working on a car in the garage as part of his VOTEC, and he was changing the alternator on this car, and I walked up, and I'm looking over his shoulder, and I said, good morning. And he just kept on working. I said, good morning. And he kept working. I said, I'm going to tell you one more time. Good morning, I expect a response. I said, do you know who I am? I'm the new executive director of this division. I'm your boss's boss. And I would expect, out of just respect, that you should say hello to me. Yeah. And I said, now, how are you doing? And then he put down his wrench, and he said, good morning, sir. I said, okay, good morning. I said, I want you to know you're doing a really good job, because I noticed you disconnected the battery before you started changing the alternator. That's a good move. And there's a reason for that. I won't go into it. But anyway, he said, well, thank you. I said, well, you're welcome. And I turned around to walk away, and my secretary was behind me, and she goes, Mr. Badeen, we gotta call Dr. So-and-so right now. We gotta call Dr. So-and-so right now and tell him that so-and-so spoke to you. I said, well, why?
Right.
Because he hasn't spoken a word in 10 years.
Whoa. What?
So, yeah. And I think it was because I did not approach him as one of the mental health professionals. It was somebody like a different, as boss or something, saying, look, I'm your boss. So say hello. When your boss says hello, you say hello back. Even if you don't like him, you do it out of respect.
Exactly.
And I think that's what it was. But when I walked away, I said, wow, that's really cool. I got that guy to speak.
Right.
After that, we couldn't shut him up.
Oh, goodness gracious. So, do you think, though, by working there and, in a story like this where you helped someone who didn't talk for 10 years, do you think that actually helped with your transition? As you're seeing how others are either out or how, whether they're civilian or veterans or military personnel, but to be able to see these different people in these different aspects.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
In the military, when you go through your courses, particularly as an NCO or an officer, you go through a lot of these courses on counseling and how to speak to people and how to communicate. But more importantly, you're actually evaluating those people all the time, because you have to know what they're capable of doing and what they're not capable of doing.
Right.
You're evaluating them from not only what their abilities are, but also are they going to be a team player. And you learn to pick up on things that you're taught, and you actually see that. I think that part of that, when I went to work for, it's called Life Resource, was the name of the management company, that I think that helped me out a lot, because I hadn't lost that skill of just kind of looking at somebody and kind of evaluating them, and I think it helped me out a lot. There was a lot of funny things too, but
that I believe.
But I think, like in this particular gentleman's case, he later went on to get a job as a mechanic. He got his own apartment.
Wow.
And he is making his own way. He's making his own money.
Yeah.
He's a productive member of the community now.
Right.
Whereas before, he was in and out of halfway houses and in the residential treatment, and he was a burden on the taxpayers. In a way, it's kind of like I one time gave this presentation at a Chamber of Commerce meeting. They asked me, what did I do for a living? And I said, well, I'm a recycler.
A recycler?
And the guy says, and of course there's all these people, and I don't understand, you're a recycler. He said, yeah, but I don't recycle paper and bottles and trash. I cycle the ultimate thing. I recycle broken people.
Wow.
That's what I do. I take people that are broken mentally or have been broken mentally because of a physical problem.
Right.
And my job is to assist them and get them back into society so that they are as happy as they can be and as independent as they can be.
Now, do you think that helps you, though?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I can see you helping others, but how does that affect you?
From my own standpoint of being self-reliant, yeah, I think that kind of, it taught me a lesson that no matter how bad things can be, you need to find a way to be self-reliant as much as you can. And I think that's really what a lot of people should be.
That's awesome.
You need, like I used to tell when I was a parole officer, I'd have a parolee come in and they would say, I'm out of prison now and this, and I said, well, you got to remember something. You have a handicap.
Right. And
you're going to have to overcome it. Your handicap is that you now have a prison record.
Yes.
And it's going to take a long time for people to trust you.
Correct.
So just live with that and do what you can to be the best you can until you are able to overcome that handicap that you've done to yourself.
Right. So that's interesting, because one of the things you mentioned earlier too is, in some instances the needs outweighed the wants.
Yeah.
Right. And so I am listening.
That's what the Army told me.
Right. Do you think when you transition into civilian world, that philosophy remained the same?
It does, as far as my family goes.
Okay.
And yeah, my community. There's a lot of things that I know I'd want to do, but if I did that, I'm sure it would have some ramifications on other people that would not be as good. Like, I would love to just take off right now and go to Hawaii.
Okay.
And maybe lay on the beach for 6 months and do nothing but drink pina coladas and get fat. But the reality is, if I did that, all my responsibilities at my work and the people that rely on me would be harmed by that, wouldn't they?
That's true, because since you brought up work, let's talk a little bit about the things that you're working on these days. So, for example, one of the ways you and I met was through the Veteran Court in Redford, Michigan, right?
Right.
And so during the break, we were talking a little bit about it, but we didn't really talk about it on the air. So if you can explain what you do, first of all, what is a Veterans Court? Because I don't think everyone understands what that is.
Well, I'm going to have to get into my notes here.
That's okay. You're prepared, so.
I'm prepared with my notes here. Okay, my God. I will not make a mistake.
No. Okay, so.
Should I do it in my radio voice?
Yeah, do it in your radio voice.
The purpose of the Veterans Treatment Court is to address through rehabilitation. Well, the purpose of the Veterans Court,
yes,
okay, is to address through rehabilitative means, okay, not through retribution, but through rehabilitation,
right,
the problems that military veterans have when they come off active duty, and those problems that they have, of course, cause problems in their reassimilation from being a soldier, a warrior, to being a civilian, and those problems result in some kind of criminal behavior.
You got it.
Could be something minor like I don't know, getting in an argument, or something really serious like aggravated assault. But whatever it is, that abhorrent behavior is rooted in their military past, either through their training or through their military experience. Like I say, it could be because they had to pull the trigger once too often. Maybe it was because they had one of their best buddies killed in front of them. Maybe it's because they were being deployed over and over again away from their family, and that causes stress. Maybe it was because of their training, where they were trained to react to a perceived threat, and they just go automatic. You know, a good example, I'll tell you, I had a good friend of mine who was in the Marine Corps. He was a sniper, and he was also a combatives instructor, you know. And he'd been out about 2 weeks out of the Marines, just retired. And he went into a service station in Houston and was filling up his car. And a kid about 14 came up to him and stuck a knife in his side to rob him. And said,
Wow.
You know, give me your money. And he said, well, he basically instantly killed him. Instantly.
Wow.
I mean, the young man was dead before he hit the pavement. He just turned around and snapped his neck, and he was gone.
Wow.
And the police came, of course, and they said it was justifiable. You know, he was protecting himself. And I was talking with him over beer. He said, you know, he was so broken by that. He says, how can I live in normal society? Because he says, I didn't know what I was doing. All I know is I felt the knife in my back, and I turned around, and I killed this young man. And it hurt him so bad that today he bought a ranch somewhere out in West Texas. He lives out there by himself to this day, has no phone, no electricity, no nothing, has no contact with nobody. And that's where he lives, as a hermit. Because he told me, he says, I can't, he was afraid that if he was, you know, living in amongst, you know, the rest of us, he might kill somebody else.
Wow.
And he didn't even intentionally do it. So.
Wow. But that makes sense.
This is a guy, by the way, who killed a lot of people, you know, in the Marines. I mean, he's a sniper.
Right.
And the one kill that hurt him the most was that one, his last one.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break again.
Okay.
Because I do want to talk a little bit more about what services and what things go on in the Veterans Court. But then I also want to talk a little bit more about what else or what other projects
So we're going to
you're
look
working
under the hood, huh?
Correct. We're going to dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
So we'll take a break here. You know, I can't hear
My mind is
I can't
melting.
hear anything. Oh, that's probably because it turned off.
Look, we're gonna get you some new headphones.
No.
We're gonna work you.
Oh, it had. Well, what happened
Is
is this had plugged out. So once I plug it in, as long as I plug it into this, it automatically powers on. So what happened is this had plugged out.
Okay.
I didn't realize it was powered off this whole time. So I'm talking like I can't hear nothing.
You good now?
Well, let me see.
Well, anyway, that's cool.
No.
So is my voice sounding
can't
okay?
hear
It sounds
nothing.
like it's cracking.
You sound like a radio voice.
Well, that's really good.
No, I still can't hear nothing. What? I hope it ain't dead. Oh. It works now.
I ain't dealing with you no more.
Hot dog.
I tell you what, if you'd like to, if you don't mind, ask me why we need veterans courts.
Okay.
What I do as a veterans court mentor? What is that all about?
Okay.
And
I like this interview. You give me the questions.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Some of the gist of it. And an interesting thing that has come out about all of this is that something that hasn't been reported this will be the first time. There's been like a 460. Well, since 2000, I think it's 2000. Well, anyway, there's been a 460% increase in the number of military veterans that go to prison in the last 10 years.
Wow.
And that's a lot.
Yeah.
So, 33% of all veterans in state penitentiaries have sentences of 20 plus years to death.
Wow.
It's a lot of. So I mean, that obviously that's a problem, and the real problem is that you think, well, what are we doing? Why are our guys coming back so messed up?
Right.
And really, it turns out this is what's happened after every war.
Huh? It just wasn't as publicized.
They did not publicize it. There are reasons why. Why would you want to publicize this? I'm
because no one's gonna want to sign up.
I want to attack Venezuela.
Right.
A good example. Okay, well, what's that going to cost us? Oh, we'll go down there like we did in Iraq and just knock them over. We'll be out of there in a month. Ha ha ha. Yeah, but they don't tell us.
Years later.
We're spending $190 billion a year on Department of Defense.
Wow.
But they don't talk about the Veterans Affairs Department too, which is also the second highest funded department in the federal government.
Wow.
They don't talk about all the guys that come back, not only physically broken, but mentally.
Mentally, right. Give
And
me one second.
That costs money.
Do you know how to fix this? They're saying I can't share. My aunt is saying she's unable to share the live video. Do you know what I'm
Your
doing?
live video?
Yeah.
That means you got it on private.
How do you take it on?
No, but you have to
Where's
you
the
have to,
Keena?
she's in there. I'm sorry, come on. You got to take it off of private. You got it posted private. You got to go to the controls, the settings on the bottom. It should say.
Yeah, I don't know where to do that.
Private, personal.
Yeah, see, I don't know.
Oh, okay, hold on. Give me transition.
Let's see, while I'm on here, I can't see.
I get you. I'm gonna get you a second.
Here's something else that you might be interested in that I think every defense attorney should know about. If you have a veteran that you're representing in court and you do not notify the court somewhere in the proceedings he's a veteran, he could get the case thrown out of court.
Interesting. I don't know.
A lot of
Most
defense
people
guys
didn't
don't
know
know that. But what's more importantly is how many guys are in prison today, veterans in prison. They were sent there, and their court never knew that they were veterans to begin with. Actually, they should be out because it violates their Sixth Amendment, the right to a fair and speedy trial, according to the Supreme Court.
I don't like how y'all treating me today.
So
You're not in here. Everybody and their mama keep calling
I just was
casino.
updating social media for you.
All I know is everybody. This is the first time 20 people call him since we've been doing the show. I had never seen this before. You disappear. I can't share the. My aunt said she wants to share the video, but she doesn't.
You gotta take. How did you change it to?
I don't know how it did that.
It's to public. I don't understand what you did.
I didn't do nothing. I just pressed live button.
All right, it should be open now. You want to turn it around?
No.
Okay.
My aunt just said she couldn't share the video.
Oh, you gotta
Can
do
you
that
help
after.
rectify it? I was like, I
You
don't
gotta
know
do
how
that
to do
after.
that.
You gotta open up your page. That's your
Yeah, when she
settings.
first do it, when you first go live, it has to be public.
So your
So you
public,
can
yeah.
set-
You can change it. She can share it later when you get done. I'll
okay.
be right here.
Because you're
Let's try it. We'll have to share it later. I don't know.
Tell her to download the app And let's put out live.
No, she wanted to just share the video.
Oh, okay.
She wanted to share it now.
Yeah, while it was going, because
y'all
I guess she might have
let her
been.
know your video gonna be on steroids next week.
Boom.
I just updated the social media, so you probably got a whole bunch of notifications from me.
I just joined this group too, and I'm hoping that I can help someone or they'll tune in at some point. Apparently the group has like 19,000 members in the group.
Whoa, that
Right.
Is this?
It's called like Friends Helping Friends or something like
I
that.
just updated all the Instagrams.
I met the founders of the group. It's on Facebook. And basically what it is people helping other people. So if you have resources or volunteering programs or whatever that can help the community. And so what happens is the members share the information with each other. So it's a closed group. And
That's one of the things we need.
correct.
I
But they're
just-
afraid to make it be an open group because you don't want people to come in and start trying to commit fraud and the hackers, and they're trying to avoid that, as well as people trying to ask you for money.
transition.
I have my situation. I just got an email today from a guy who wants me to start a 501c3.
Yeah.
He's out of Florida.
Talk
Talk about it off air.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, my headphones work again.
Are your headphones working?
That's a good.
I time
That's a
that
good
just
way.
right?
Yeah, you really did. Yeah, clearly we're having so much fun. Yes, we are.
Now, when I invite you on my radio show,
Yes.
don't mess it up like I'm messing it up. Okay?
You're not messing up mine. You're making it fun
Oh, well, that's good.
as we share some deep information because
Yeah,
we're going to
sure.
go just a little bit deeper.
Oh.
So before we took this second break, we were talking about the Veterans Court and why veteran courts are necessary. But I guess my question to you is, being that you play a role in it, we'll let you talk about that, but why do we need veterans courts?
Well, you know, when I was approached with becoming the mentor coordinator for our court, I was kind of, I had some trepidations about it, I'll be honest, because I knew what it was like to deal with troubled people because of my experience in Texas. But then on dealing with troubled veterans was kind of a different issue, and I had some trepidations about it. I mean, you're talking about people that have PTSD or have severe mental issues that are experienced, highly trained killers. Let's be honest.
Right.
So
That's exactly what it is.
and they're young guys, you know, but then I started looking into the statistics, which most people are not aware of. And when I saw the stats on what was happening to veterans, I said, somebody has to do something.
Right.
And here we have Judge Khalil who wanted to do something, and she's coming to me for help. How could I turn it down? And some of the stats that shocked me were, for example, 21% of all suicides in America every day are committed by veterans.
Whoa.
We only make up 7.5% of the population, yet 22 to 25 veterans every day, even today, kill themselves.
Wow.
That's amazing. I mean, that's a lot of people.
That is a lot.
You had 19% of all Iraq war veterans and 11% of all Afghanistan war veterans have reported mental health issues to the VA since they've been back.
Wow.
In 2012, it was reported to Congress that 25 to 35% of all wounded soldiers become addicted to prescription or illegal drugs. Most of that was while they were in military care waiting to be discharged. 36% of all post 9/11 veterans have post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I know that they say it's about 30%. Some have said it's about 33%. The VA says it's 36%. Okay, I'll go with their figures because they're the ones that deal with it.
Right.
The Defense Logistics Agency spent $1.1 billion on psychotropic medications and pain medications since 2011 for our soldiers.
And 2011 to 2012 is when we were going into Iraq and Afghanistan, correct?
So from about 2003 on. I mean, that's a lot of pills.
Correct.
And that's psychotropic pills. Those are not, like, oh, I'll take an Advil.
Correct.
This is some serious stuff.
Talking about stronger than that.
You had 1 in 6 veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan suffer from substance abuse today.
Wow.
1 in 6. Oh my God. The National Coalition for Homeless Veterans estimate that some 1.5 million veterans are at risk of homelessness. 1.5 million veterans.
That's a lot.
And these guys, they served honorably. You have out of 21,000 veterans that were surveyed by the Disabled Veterans of America, DVA. 43% documented. 43% of the 21,000 they surveyed at random. 43% had documented traumatic brain injuries. 34% have been deployed 3 or more times. 67% have been diagnosed with depression, and 76% reported nightmares or trouble sleeping.
The funny thing about it is, if you were the veteran, you would have thought you're the only one that feels this way.
Exactly.
You go, oh, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just not sleeping or I have a nightmare. I'm going to just go to the doctor and I'll be fine, get something and I should be fine. What you don't realize is that a lot of your peers feel the same way.
Yes.
And without talking about it, no one will really know that you feel the same way.
That's true. And quite honestly,
because that's amazing.
People are saying, well, why is it so bad? Why are our veterans coming back so broken?
Right.
They didn't go in the Army that way, or the Navy, or the Air Force.
Or whatever branch, correct.
Heck, it's like the guy next door was a paper boy, and the kid across the street was the honor graduate in high school, and the girl down the street was the cheerleader, and now they're coming back. And they're broken and full of nightmares. What happened to them? We
Correct.
didn't get to that way.
Correct.
And now they're coming back. They had dreams of going to college or becoming a carpenter, owning a gas station, whatever. And now those dreams they're only dreams they have are nightmares.
Right.
So what's happened between?
But where's all the money going? Because if 1.1 billion and there's billions of dollars that we keep discussing, and yet you have veterans that may want to start businesses and don't know the resources. They are homeless because either they don't know or they don't want to be associated with the VA, for example, or whatever it might be. And it's like, how do we help?
Well,
is the veteran court, as a mentor at the veteran court, do you believe this is a version of helping?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. Although we cannot really get involved until they make contact with law enforcement, which means they got to get in trouble.
So they have to commit a crime to go to the veteran court.
And to get your benefits. Because when you go down, you're laughing, but I kid you not.
It's just the way you said it.
You go down to the VA, and you say, oh, I'm sick, okay, we'll put your name down here at the bottom of the list. And you wait and wait and wait, and eventually you get your appointment.
Right.
But if you go to veterans court, oh no, you're top of the list. You got to go now because you've committed a crime, and you may be a danger to the community or whatever, and you've got a judge who's sitting there and has the VA representative in that court.
Right.
You've been to our court?
Right.
Did you see the VA guy sitting right there?
Correct.
How many times has she turned to the VA guy and said, by the end of this month, I want this guy evaluated for this? And he sits there with his note
prepared.
And he's got his notes on his laptop. He types it in.
Right, because they even say, did you follow up? Did you go to the appointments? And I'm like, how's that possible? It was just, 30 days. Like, my brother is a veteran, and he hurt his foot the other day, and they're telling him it might be 3 months before he sees a doctor.
Well, don't tell him to get caught shoplifting or something, because don't do that.
Holy smokes.
But yeah, that's how bad it is. And yes, we have had, well, I'll tell you, one of my first mentees as a mentor was a guy who was homeless for about 25 years. And he was picked up shoplifting in a 7-Eleven in Redford. And anyway, he went into the Veterans Court. And he was evaluated by the VA. And it turned out he had some issues. and they fixed it. Okay, we got him an apartment because we mentors work together.
Right.
And we got him an apartment. It was one of these, what they call it, I think it's Section 8 housing or something, but it's a nice apartment. It's a clean apartment. We got him a volunteer job, which he likes. He works, I think, at one of the soup kitchens.
Okay.
And he's getting 100% disability now, which he qualified for before, but never went to the VA. And interestingly enough, his estranged wife of 20 years or so came back to him. His grandchildren's come by and they visit him all the time.
Okay.
And he told me, we were sitting in his apartment one day drinking a cup of coffee. He says, the best thing that ever happened to me was the day I got caught shoplifting.
What?
Best thing, happiest day of my life. He says, if I hadn't been caught shoplifting by a police officer in Redford, Michigan, and gone to the Veterans Court, I'd still be out living on the streets.
Wow. I mean, I have seen some transformations even with the few times I've been there.
Some of them are pretty shocking.
Yeah.
I have one guy who was one of my mentees that was picked up homeless, sleeping in the snow. And a fairly young man. He'd been homeless for about 6 months, I guess. And he got picked up for vagrancy or something down in South County somewhere. Anyway, today I'm proud to say that he has a very high-paying job as a supervisor on an assembly line in a factory, which I won't name where it is. He is studying to be a chemist at night at the University of Michigan.
Nice.
And he's married, has a kid, has a wife, and a car.
All based on the assistance
I
from
went
the
by to
Veterans
see him
Court.
one time. He says, this is really great, but this mortgages are killing me.
Real life, adulting, hashtag adulting.
But those are the success stories too. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that these problems of returning veterans have always existed. We just never knew about it. It's like I had an uncle from World War II, for example, and a tragedy happened. He committed suicide in 1947.
I'm sorry.
And he was in the Badeen Death March. He'd been captured. They shipped him, I understand, to Japan, where he is actually put on display in a zoo.
Oh.
And he lived literally as an animal, all in the zoo, And then finally, after the war, he came back, and of course, he wasn't right in the head. But we didn't talk about that,
right?
Because mental illness had a stigma back then. You didn't talk about, see. And unfortunately, he ended his life. He couldn't take it anymore. And everybody, I think, that had somebody serve in the past has a story like that about, Uncle so-and-so came back and wasn't quite right, or so-and-so came back and he was beating his wife and kids all the time. He wasn't like that before he went in the military and this kind of thing.
Right.
Well, people started looking into this, and it's just recently, in the last few years, been finding out that there's been some huge problems after wars. I remember a famous quote by a doctor who became a dean at the University of Chicago, and she actually did her doctoral thesis on the great crime wave of 1866 through 1880, I think is what it was titled. It was right after the Civil War, and at one point, she was able to show statistics where 90% of the prisoners in state penitentiaries that kept statistics were formerly soldiers from the Civil War. 90%.
Wow.
I think one warden was quoted here. I was looking in my notes that he quoted that they had their spirit had been broken by their apprenticeship in death.
Wow.
And
that's
anyway,
very interesting. Yeah.
90% of the inmates. Yeah, here I got my notes here. Here's a couple of good ones here. Did you know that 2,000 to 6,000, we don't know the exact number because the record's been destroyed, veterans that returned from World War II because they were so difficult to handle, because they were so out of it, that they were involuntarily lobotomized. 2,000 to 6,000 veterans from World War II were involuntarily lobotomized because they were so violent and couldn't be controlled.
Wow.
The last one passed away, I think, about 6 or 7 years ago. And that person had been living in the VA in Madison, Wisconsin, all these years.
That's
as a World War II veteran.
wild. I mean, that's completely wild. I mean, I don't think we do get to see the percentages or the numbers because it's not publicized. And so with you providing that today, I mean, that's amazing.
But it goes on. There's all these studies that now are leaking out. For example, about 46% of veterans suffering from PTSD, which I mentioned is about 1/3 of all returning veterans today, have been arrested or imprisoned from Vietnam, as compared with only 11.6 who did not have PTSD.
Wow.
So, I mean, these are huge, staggering numbers, and this is not something that has not been known about for generations. It's
Right.
just been something we don't really
We just don't talk about it. I mean,
Stigma.
even as civilians, we just don't talk about
Correct.
it.
Here's some more interesting stats, if you'd like to know, about veterans courts. Okay? Veterans courts are founded by veterans and local judges at the local community. This is not a top-down thing.
Right.
This is a grassroots movement of people in the community trying to take care of our own. And these courts are so successful that according to the Department of Justice figures from about a year ago, the average veterans courts nationwide have a recidivism rate of less than 5%.
Wow.
In our case, in our court, it's about, I think it's 2.5 or 3%, and that's over a 5-year period.
Wow.
Michigan ranks 11th in the nation in veterans population and has the highest number of veterans courts, so that's something to be proud of. I mean, probably better than 12% of all veterans courts in the country are right here in Michigan. So that's something that is of interest. Another interesting thing is when veterans courts got started, they only, for every dollar that was spent on veterans courts, the state was saving $27 in downstream cost.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, when you think about it, I mean, it's not only morally right,
Right, right.
but it's it's financially correct. It's practical. I mean, why wouldn't you have veterans courts? Why wouldn't you do this? You're not only
Right.
saving huge amounts of money, but you're also fixing those people in your community using those community resources that are available
Right.
from the VA. So.
That is correct. I mean, that's amazing. So aside from working on the Veterans Court, what else things do you do as a veteran?
As a veteran?
Yeah.
Well,
Or, I mean, as an individual.
I do a lot of things. Of course, I'm very involved with my church. Let's see, I sing in the choir of my church. And I also sing in the Orthodox Choir of Detroit.
Oh, wow.
The somewhat famous choir.
I knew you had a radio
Church
show
guy.
voice, but I didn't know you had singing voice.
Yeah, I have a radio program, a Christian radio program that comes on Sunday afternoons. And of course, I'm also the operations manager for Midwest Auto Auction. For them.
Yes.
And let's see, what else do I do? That's about enough, isn't it?
Yeah, I was gonna say you're surely doing a lot. Do you, besides from the Veterans Court, do you mentor? Well, I should say, I know you mentor at the Veterans Court, but do you mentor outside of that? Are you open to
another project? You mean like a?
Yes, or even for the veterans.
Just for the veterans.
But are you open to other veterans outside of the Veterans Court?
Oh yes, yeah. I have veterans. I don't think there's a week that doesn't go by that a veteran doesn't call me or drop by and ask me, help me because I did something or I need something. I had a veteran call me last week who apparently has a warrant out for his arrest.
Oh, holy smokes.
For I think he got drunk and got in a fight or something, and there was a warrant out for his arrest. He says, what do I do? And I said, well, the first thing you need to do is call this attorney and turn yourself in.
Right.
And then once you do that,
you go to the Veterans Court.
Maybe get you to the Veterans Court so we can fix it. But
right.
until then, you're a wanted man. We can't, you need to fix this.
Right.
But I mean,
Sooner
that's the
than
kind of
later.
stuff that goes on. A lot of these guys, they'll call me up and say, I've got a problem with, can you get me into court? Or I got a VA problem, or Can you refer me to somebody?
Now, how do they normally reach you? Do you have like a hotline?
I have a card
Okay.
that I've been giving out to my mentees and people I meet in the community, and they just seem to pop up somewhere. It's whether
Okay.
sometimes I get them referred. I think one of the strangest thing is one afternoon I'm sitting there, and my secretary says that there's 3 people here to see you about a veterans problem, and I said, well, send them on up, and they came up. And it was a man, a woman, and their daughter. And their daughter she was beaten up bad. She had black eye and contusions and everything else. And they said that she had she went to a bar with a girlfriend the night before. Excuse me. And her girlfriend was drunk, but she wasn't. But they came out of the bar, and she went into a seizure.
Oh, wow.
Of some sort. And there were 2 police officers there that thought she was drunk. So they went to arrest her, and I guess she was flailing around or whatever, right. So they proceeded to tase her 4 or 5 times, and it aggravated it, and they apparently, had all kinds of problems with her, and, and fighting and things, and put her in the back of the car, took her down. So they finally released her, and she was charged with drunken, disorderly, and aggravated assault on a police officer with intent to do great bodily harm with weapons of mass destruction
and all that jazz. Yes.
So they released her out on bond. They brought her to me, and they said, "Can you get her in a veterans court?" I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "But I'm more concerned why she had this seizure. She wasn't drunk."
Correct.
I said, "No." So I called Rick Graham, our veterans court guy, and he had her go immediately down to the VA, and they registered her, and they didn't get her in. They took her parents then took her to a civilian hospital, and they gave her an MRI and found out she had a cracked skull.
Oh, wow.
And it was causing this seizure problem, and as it turns out, she got the cracked skull by being in an attack in Afghanistan.
Whoa.
Where a vehicle had rolled over on top of her, and her helmet had protected her, but apparently it didn't protect her that much.
Wow.
and she didn't know she had this. She thought she was just having headaches and things.
Correct.
That's the kind of stuff that we do. So it's a physical ailment. So we got her down to the VA, and we got her into Veterans Court, and we were able to get her operated on. So I understand she still has seizures, but at least we know what it is, and she's getting treatment.
Absolutely.
And at least the police aren't tasering her when she
has seizure. Right, exactly. So what would be the best way if someone else had a situation even similar? I mean, that's quite unique, but what would be the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can get in touch with me. I would recommend that they call an attorney and have it referred. I mean, all I can do is refer them to an attorney.
Right.
But they can call me at my office, and I'll give it to you. It's 313-817-1213, and my name is Jim. And that goes right to my desk.
Awesome.
That's not going through my secretary. You can call me direct. I don't mind. If I don't like it, I'll just hang up anyway, right?
Oh, my gosh. At least give him one time.
I did want to mention, though, before we get cut off here, if I might, this is more, over the years, this has become quite a thing, and I know you're an attorney, an accomplished attorney, and for all accomplished attorneys out there, as astute as you, have that acumen.
Appreciate that.
Just to let you guys know that there is a Supreme Court case out there, and I'm going to quote it. It's the George Porter Jr. versus Bill McCullum. I'll give you the case number. I'm going to worry about that, but it's George Porter versus McCullum.
Right.
And in that case, George Porter was convicted of a double murder when he came back. If he walked into his house and found his wife sleeping with some guy, he pulled out his gun and proceeded to shoot them. And of course, it was in Florida. So, he got the death penalty.
Right.
But what happened was he appealed it up, and the Supreme Court held that there was no time between the time of his arrest, the time he was convicted, that it was ever brought out that he was a military veteran. And this was important. Here he was a combat military veteran on top of that, who'd survived 2 or 3 battles, etc. And the court threw the case out. They said he had been denied his right to a fair trial because it was never brought out that he was a veteran.
Wow.
And that's a Supreme Court case going back to 2010. And I got a quote here from the court. Our nation has a long tradition of according leniency to veterans in recognition of their service, especially for those who fought on the front, as Porter did. Moreover, the relevance of Porter's extensive combat experience is not only that he served honorably under extreme hardship and gruesome conditions, but also that the jury might find mitigating the intense stress and mental and emotional toll that combat took on Porter. Mm-hmm. And because that was never brought out, the Supreme Court of the United States tossed his case out. So
it's important to share that you're a veteran.
But that's it. You know, we're talking about some of the other time. I remember one guy. This is kind of a veteran story to give an example of kind of pressures that veterans run into. You have a guy, Army Reserve, National Guard. Do we have time?
No.
In that case, then I won't tell the story. But I will leave you with one last parting thought.
Okay.
Famous last words. I feel no pain. I have no more nightmares or flashbacks or hallucinations. I'm no longer constantly depressed or afraid or worried. I am free. Those are the last words of Sergeant Daniel Summers, who served in Iraq with over 300 combat missions to his name. And he said that the last words the day he committed suicide.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. With that, we're going to close. Thank you, Jim, since I can't call you Mr. Badeen. Jim, for coming on the show and being a guest speaker today, being our historian for the day, and sharing stats on veterans that, I mean, even I didn't know. And I bet many people who are listening or who will listen to this later on didn't know how important it is, for one, to mention that you are a veteran. 2, you're not alone. And 3, there are plenty of resources and people to help. We just got to know you need it.
That's correct.
Right? All right.
That's correct. We know
So-
we can fix it.
Correct, exactly. And so this will be the end of our veteran series. And so next month we're going to move forward with educators and how education is working with entrepreneurs and working in Detroit. So please stay tuned and stay with us. Next week, same time, same place. Take care.
All right.
That was really good. I put you on your,
That was educational.
That was interesting. Really
How many
interesting.
listeners do you have?
Thank you.